Nadine Achebe's hands were raw from bleach when she found him. A boy, no older than 5, curled beneath the bus shelter on Keele Street like a discarded coat. No shoes, no jacket. His lips had gone the color of ash, and the October wind was not done with him yet. She had $11 in her bank account, a daughter in grade 2 who needed a winter coat by Friday, and a bus that would leave in 4 minutes. The smart thing was to keep walking, but Nadine had buried a husband who once told her that the world only gets colder when good people decide it's not their problem. So she knelt down on the wet concrete and said, "Hey, sweetheart, can you hear me?" The boy's eyes opened. Brown, enormous, and completely empty of recognition. He looked at her the way an animal looks at headlights, not with fear exactly, but with the blankness of someone who has already decided that whatever comes next will hurt. Nadine Achebe was 36 years old. She cleaned office towers in downtown Toronto from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, 5 nights a week. Before that, she had been a pharmacy technician in Brampton, but the clinic closed during the pandemic and the severance ran out before the grief did. Her husband, Tunde, died in 2022, a blood clot nobody saw coming, sudden as a light switch. He was 34. Their daughter, Zara, was 4 at the time. She asked for her father every night for 11 months, and then one evening she simply stopped, and that silence was worse than all the asking. Now it was just the two of them in a basement apartment on Trethewey Drive, a place where the ceiling leaked when it rained, and the radiator clanged like someone trapped inside was trying to get out. Nadine worked nights, so she could walk Zara to school in the mornings and pick her up in the afternoons. The math barely worked. Some weeks it didn't work at all. But they had a routine, and routines were the scaffolding she used to keep the whole structure from falling in on itself. She was not supposed to be at this bus stop. Her regular route ran along Jane Street, but a water main break had rerouted the 35 bus, and the detour added 20 minutes to her commute. 20 minutes she did not have. Mrs. Almeida, the retired Portuguese woman who watched Zara on school nights, charged nothing but expected punctuality as payment, and Nadine was already cutting it close. But here was this boy. This silent, shoeless, shivering boy. She pulled off her own jacket, the puffy black one she'd found at Value Village for $12, the warmest thing she owned, and wrapped it around his shoulders. He did not flinch. He did not speak. He just watched her with those enormous brown eyes, and Nadine felt something crack open in her chest. "Where's your mom, baby? Where's your dad?" Nothing. Not a word, not a gesture, not even a shake of his head. She checked the time. Her bus was 2 minutes away. If she got on it, she would make it to work on time. Someone else would find the boy. Someone with a car, a phone plan that wasn't prepaid, a life that had room for emergencies. Someone better equipped for this. Nadine thought about Zara, about the coat she still needed, about the rent that was already 9 days late. Then she thought about Tunde, about what he would say if he could see her standing here, calculating whether a child's life fit into her schedule. "Damn it, Tunde," she muttered, the way she always spoke to him. Half prayer, half argument. She picked up the boy. He weighed almost nothing, which terrified her more than anything else. A 5-year-old should not weigh almost nothing. She carried him to the nearest open business, a Somali restaurant called Hodan's Kitchen, 3 blocks east, and asked to use their phone. The owner, a woman with henna-stained hands and a skeptical expression, looked at Nadine, looked at the boy, and handed over her cell without a word. Nadine called 911. The dispatcher was polite and efficient and told her a unit would arrive in 45 minutes. Non-emergency response times, she explained. The boy did not appear to be in immediate medical danger. 45 minutes. Nadine's shift started in 30. She called Mrs. Almeida and explained she would be late. The silence on the other end was louder than shouting. Then she called her supervisor at Clean Pro Services and told him she had a family emergency. He said if she missed another shift, there would be no more shifts to miss. Nadine sat in a plastic chair in Hodan's kitchen with a stranger's child in her lap and waited for help that was in no hurry to arrive. The police came an hour and 12 minutes later. 2 officers, one young and one not, both looking at Nadine with the particular expression she had learned to read years ago, the one that said they were trying to decide what kind of problem she was. The younger officer asked her name, her address, her relationship to the child. He asked these questions twice, in slightly different order, as if checking for inconsistencies in a story she had no reason to fabricate. The older officer examined the boy, who still had not spoken. "And you just found him at the bus stop," the younger one repeated. "Yes, by yourself? Yes. And you didn't think to leave him there and call us from your home?" Nadine stared at the officer. "He's 5 years old and he had no shoes. Would you have left him?" The officer wrote something in his notebook that Nadine could not read and did not ask about. They took the boy to sick kids. Nadine rode in the back of the cruiser because no one told her she couldn't, and because the boy had gripped her index finger with his small hand and would not let go. At the hospital, the triage nurse noted signs of malnutrition, dehydration, and what appeared to be older bruising on his arms and back. The boy was admitted and Nadine was asked to fill out paperwork. She did not know his name, his age, his parents, his address, or his medical history. She knew that he weighed almost nothing and held her finger like it was the only solid thing in his world. A social worker arrived around midnight, a tired woman with kind eyes and a lanyard that said Children's Aid Society. She explained that the boy would be placed in emergency foster care once a bed became available, which could take 24 to 72 hours. In the meantime, the hospital would keep him. Nadine should have left then. She had done her part, more than her part. She had missed work, spent bus fare she couldn't replace, and given away the only jacket that kept her warm on the 40-minute walk from the bus stop to the office tower. But the boy was still holding her finger. She stayed until 3 in the morning, when he finally fell asleep. Then she rode 2 night buses home, climbed into the basement apartment, and found Zara asleep on the couch, with Mrs. Almeida dozing in the armchair beside her. Television was still on, playing a rerun of something nobody was watching. Nadine covered her daughter with a blanket, thanked Mrs. Almeida in a whisper, and sat alone in the kitchen. The fridge hummed its broken song. The clock on the microwave blinked 3:47. She put her head in her hands and cried, not because anything was wrong. Everything was wrong. Everything had been wrong for years. But because she was so tired of holding it all together, and tonight had cost her something she could not calculate yet. She went back the next morning, and the morning after that, the hospital staff began to recognize her. The boy, still unidentified, listed in the system as a John Doe, responded to her voice in ways he did not respond to anyone else's. He would eat when she fed him. He would close his eyes when she sang the Yoruba lullabies her mother had sung to her. He would not speak, but he would point at things, and his pointing had a specificity that suggested a mind far more active than his silence implied. On the 4th day, a neurologist confirmed that the boy's mutism appeared to be psychological, not physical. Selective mutism, possibly trauma-induced. He could speak. He had chosen not to. On the 5th day, the social worker returned with news. No missing child report matching the boy's description had been filed anywhere in the Greater Toronto area. No one was looking for him. The system was overwhelmed, beds were scarce, and the social worker's caseload was triple what the guidelines recommended. She looked at Nadine with an expression that was half apology and half plea. "We have a process for emergency kinship placement," she said carefully. "It's not foster care exactly. It's more of a temporary arrangement while we locate the family. There would be a small stipend. You would need to pass a background check." Nadine heard what the woman was really asking. The same thing the hospital administrator had been asking without words for 5 days. The same thing the universe had been asking since she knelt on that wet concrete. Take him home or let the system swallow him whole. She thought about her apartment, 400 square feet, 1 bedroom, a daughter who already shared a bed with her because there was nowhere else to sleep. She thought about the $11 in her bank account, which was now $6 after bus fare. She thought about Tunde, who would have said yes before the question was finished. "I'll take him," Nadine said. Zara handled the news the way Zara handled everything, with a directness that left no room for adult nonsense. Is he my brother now? He's staying with us for a while, baby. Until we find his family. Does he like dinosaurs? I don't know. You can ask him. He doesn't talk, Mom. Then show him the dinosaurs and see if he smiles. His name surfaced on day 9. Not through any official channel, not through the police investigation that seemed to move with the urgency of glacial drift, but through Zara. She had been sitting beside the boy on the living room floor, showing him her collection of dollar store figurines, narrating elaborate stories about each one with the confidence of a child who has never doubted her own imagination. "This one is Rex," she said, holding up a plastic T-Rex. "And this one is Sarah. And this one doesn't have a name yet. What should we call him?" The boy looked at the figurine. Then he looked at Zara. Then, in a voice so quiet it was almost not a voice at all, he said, "Jasper." Zara's eyes went wide. She whipped her head toward the kitchen where Nadine was washing dishes. "Mom, he talked. He said Jasper." Nadine dried her hands and walked into the living room. She knelt beside the boy, keeping her movements slow. "Jasper? That's a good name for a dinosaur. Is that your name too?" The boy's lips pressed together, his eyes filled with something vast and unreadable. Then he nodded, once, and the nod cost him something visible. "Jasper," Nadine repeated softly. "That's a strong name. I'm glad you told us." More words came after that, slowly, like water, through a crack in a dam. Jasper liked peanut butter. Jasper was scared of the dark. Jasper's mom had gone away, and his dad had a loud voice. Jasper had been outside for a long time before the bus stop. He did not know how long. Time, for a 5-year-old who has been abandoned, does not move in hours and days. It moves in hunger and cold and the length of darkness. Nadine reported every detail to the social worker, who reported it to the police, who added it to a file that grew thicker without growing closer to resolution. The system ground on. Nadine's life ground on beside it, only now with an extra mouth to feed, an extra body to keep warm, and an extra heart to worry about breaking. She lost her job on a Wednesday. Not dramatically, no argument, no confrontation. Just a text message from her supervisor. Position filled, final pay deposited, 3 missed shifts in 2 weeks. CleanPro's policy was clear. 2 absences without coverage was a warning. 3 was termination. Nadine read the text sitting on the bathroom floor while both children slept. She did not cry this time. She was past crying. She was in the territory beyond tears, where the body simply goes quiet and waits to see what happens next. What happened next was worse. The story appeared online first, then migrated to local news. Not a big story, Toronto had bigger ones, but big enough. The headline read, "Woman takes in unidentified chilled abandoned on Keele Street." A neighbor had spoken to a reporter. The details were mostly accurate but arranged in a way that made Nadine's decision sound less like compassion and more like something that required investigation. Then someone identified Jasper. His full name was Jasper Holt Carruthers. His father was Douglas Carruthers. The name meant nothing to Nadine, but it meant a great deal to the financial pages of the Globe and Mail. Douglas Carruthers was a partner at Holt Carruthers Capital, a private equity firm that managed north of $8 billion in assets. His ex-wife, Megan Holt, had died of an overdose 4 months earlier. Custody had defaulted to Douglas, who had, according to the investigation that now accelerated with the speed that money and media attention always seemed to provide, left the boy with a series of nannies, the last of whom had quit without notice 3 weeks before Jasper was found on Keele Street. 3 weeks. The boy had been missing for 3 weeks and his father had not filed a report. The outrage was immediate and loud and entirely useless to Nadine, who found herself suddenly visible in a way she had never wanted to be. Reporters called the number they found through public records. A camera crew showed up outside the apartment building on Trethwy Drive. Her landlord called to say she was behind on rent, and perhaps it was time to explore other living arrangements. And then the lawyers arrived. Not Nadine's lawyers. She did not have lawyers. These were Douglas Carruthers' lawyers. 2 women and a man in suits that cost more than Nadine's annual rent. sitting in the social worker's office with documents spread across the table like a military operation. They wanted Jasper returned to his father immediately. They presented evidence that Douglas Carruthers was a fit parent. Character references, financial statements, a letter from a therapist who had apparently been seeing Douglas for parenting support since approximately 48 hours after the news story broke. They expressed concern about the unvetted environment in which the child was currently residing. They used the word irregular 7 times. Nadine counted. The social worker explained that a hearing would be required, that Jasper's well-being was the priority, that the process existed to protect children, not to expedite the preferences of parents who had misplaced them. The lawyers did not like this. They made phone calls. The phone calls produced more phone calls. Within 2 days, Nadine received a visit from a children's aid supervisor she had never met, who conducted an inspection of the apartment with the thoroughness of someone looking for reasons to fail it. Zara, who had been standing in the hallway watching the woman examine their kitchen cupboards, tugged on Nadine's sleeve. "Mom, why is that lady looking at our food? She's making sure we have enough, baby." "We don't, though. You said so last week." The supervisor wrote something down. That night, Nadine sat on the edge of the bathtub and had the conversation with herself that she had been avoiding since the beginning. She could give Jasper back. She could step away. Let the system handle it. Let the lawyers and the money sort it out the way lawyers and money always did. She could focus on Zara, on finding a new job, on keeping her own life from unraveling. But she kept seeing those enormous brown eyes, kept feeling that small hand gripping her finger, kept hearing his voice, that first word Jasper offered like a gift he wasn't sure anyone wanted. Zara appeared in the bathroom doorway. She had her father's face, the same wide-set eyes, the same stubborn jaw. "Mom, you always tell me to do what's right even when it's hard." "I do. Is this hard?" "Very. Are you going to do it anyway?" Nadine looked at her daughter, this 7-year-old girl who had lost her father and learned to carry silence and still believed that her mother was the kind of person who did hard things. "Yeah, baby. I'm going to do it anyway." The hearing was set for a Friday. Nadine showed up in the only blazer she owned, a thrift store find that was slightly too big in the shoulders. She did not have a lawyer. Legal aid had a 6-week wait list. Douglas Carruthers had 3 lawyers and an expensive haircut, and the rigid posture of a man who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. He did not look at Nadine. He did not look at anyone, really. He looked at a fixed point somewhere above the judge's head, as if the entire proceeding was taking place beneath him. The judge was a woman named Justice Achebe, who had the calm, unhurried manner of someone who had seen every variety of human failure and had stopped being surprised by any of it. The lawyers presented their case. Douglas Carruthers was the biological father. He had rights. He had resources. He had taken steps to address the circumstances that led to the child's temporary displacement. Temporary displacement, as if a 5-year-old alone on a Toronto street in October was a filing error. Again, the judge asked Nadine to speak. She had not prepared a speech. She had not prepared anything. She stood and said what was true. "Your Honor, I found Jasper on a bus stop with no shoes and no jacket. He weighed almost nothing. He didn't speak for 9 days, and when he finally did, it was because my daughter showed him a toy dinosaur and asked him a question nobody else had thought to ask. I'm not his mother. I'm not trying to be his mother. But for the last 3 weeks, I'm the one who fed him and held him when he woke up screaming at 2 in the morning and sat on the bathroom floor singing to him until he fell back asleep. I did that because it needed doing and because nobody else was doing it." She paused. Her hands were shaking. She put them flat on the table. "I'm not asking for custody. I'm asking this court to make sure that whoever takes care of this boy actually takes care of him. Not on paper, not through nannies and lawyers, actually. Because he deserves that. Every child deserves that, and he hasn't been getting it." The courtroom was quiet. Douglas Carruthers was still looking at the fixed point above the judge's head, but something in his jaw had changed. A tightening, a fracture in the facade. Justice Osei ordered a 60-day supervised custody review. Jasper would remain with Nadine during that period, while a clinical assessment of Douglas Carruthers' parenting capacity was completed. Douglas's lawyers protested. The judge was unmoved. Outside the courthouse, the November air tasted like metal and exhaust. Nadine was pulling on her too-thin jacket. She had never replaced the one she gave Jasper when a voice stopped her. "Miss Achebe." She turned. Douglas Carruthers stood on the courthouse steps, his lawyers nowhere in sight. Up close, he looked less like a financial titan and more like a man who had not slept in a very long time. His eyes were bloodshot. His expensive coat hung on him as if he had recently lost weight. "I want to offer you compensation," he said. The words came out rehearsed, corporate. "For your expenses, for the disruption to your life. I can write a check today, a check $100,000 for your trouble." Nadine studied his face. She thought about what $100,000 meant. Rent, Zara's winter coat, a security deposit on an apartment where the ceiling didn't leak, groceries without arithmetic, a life with margins instead of edges. She also thought about Jasper, about the bruises on his arms. About 3 weeks on the street while this man sat in a glass tower managing $8 billion of other people's money. "I don't want your check, Mr. Carruthers." His face flickered, confusion, then something harder. "Everyone wants money. I want to know where you were. For 3 weeks your son was gone and you didn't file a report. I want to know how a man with all the money in the world loses his child and doesn't go looking." The question landed like a hand against glass. Douglas's expression cracked, and beneath the crack was something Nadine had not expected. Shame. Not the performed kind, the real kind that sits in your stomach like a stone and doesn't move. "I didn't know," he said. His voice had dropped the corporate polish. "I was in Vancouver closing a deal. The nanny was supposed to. I called every day and she said he was fine. She said everything was fine. I didn't know she had left until the police called me. By then my lawyers had already." He stopped. His throat moved. "My lawyers told me to manage the optics. That's what they said. Manage the optics. And your son, my son." The words seemed to cost him something. I never learned how. Megan handled everything. When she died, I thought money could replace what she did. I hired people. I delegated. The way I delegate everything. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. I delegated my son. Nadine let the silence hold. The wind pushed dead leaves across the courthouse steps, and neither of them moved. "You want to pay me back?" she said, finally. "Don't write me a check. Learn your son's name." "I know his name. I don't mean the name on the birth certificate. I mean the things he's afraid of. The foods he won't eat. The song that makes him stop crying at 2 in the morning." She held his gaze. "I learned all of that in 3 weeks. You've had 5 years. Douglas Carruthers looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded, and the nod had the quality of a man agreeing to something much larger than a conversation on courthouse steps. He left without another word. Nadine watched him walk toward a black sedan where a driver was waiting, and she thought about how strange it was that the loneliest people she had ever met were always the ones getting into cars with drivers. The 60-day review changed things. Not quickly, and not cleanly. Change never moves that way when lawyers and institutions are involved. But it moved. Douglas Carruthers completed a parenting assessment. He attended weekly therapy, not the performative kind arranged by his legal team, but real sessions with a clinician who specialized in attachment disorders. He visited Jasper at Nadine's apartment twice a week, sitting on the living room floor and letting his son show him dinosaur figurines while Zara supervised with the authority of a child who took hospitality seriously. The first few visits were painful to watch. Douglas sat with the stiffness of a man who had never been on a floor voluntarily, holding plastic toys like they were fragile investments. Jasper circled him at a distance, watchful. Neither of them knew how to bridge the gap. It was Zara, predictably, who forced the issue. "You have to actually play," she told Douglas during the third visit, hands on her hips. "You can't just hold them. You have to make the sounds." Douglas Carruthers, managing partner of an $8 billion fund, made dinosaur sounds on a basement apartment floor while a 7-year-old girl corrected his technique. Nadine, watching from the kitchen doorway, felt something shift in the room. Not resolution, not forgiveness, but the beginning of something that might, with enough patience and enough plastic dinosaurs, grow into both. After 6 weeks, the court-appointed psychologist submitted a cautiously optimistic report. After 8 weeks, a graduated transition plan was approved. After 10 weeks, Jasper moved back to his father's home. A home that now included a live-in child psychologist, a structured daily routine, and a father who had cleared his calendar of everything except the work of learning how to be present. Nadine expected to feel relief. Instead, she felt the particular emptiness of a house that has recently held one more heartbeat than it was designed for. The check arrived 3 days after Jasper left. Not $100,000. $250,000, made out to a trust in Zara's name with a letter that read, in Douglas's stiff handwriting, "For her education. Because she taught me more in 10 weeks than I learned in 47 years. D.C." Nadine stared at the check for a long time. Her first instinct was to send it back. The idea of taking money from the man she had lectured on the courthouse steps felt like hypocrisy, like selling the moral high ground she had claimed. But then she thought about Zara, about the winter coat, about the leaking ceiling and the clanging radiator and the $6 bank account. She thought about Tunde, who had been practical even when he was principled, who would have said that pride is a luxury and a child's future is not. She deposited the check into the trust. She did not spend $1 of it on herself, but she let it sit there, a quiet promise that Zara's life would have options that Nadine's had not. The afternoon Nadine picked Zara up from school, her daughter climbed into the back seat of the used Corolla, bought with the first paycheck from her new job at a community health clinic, not from the trust, and said, "Mom, are we still poor?" Nadine looked at her daughter in the rearview mirror, Tunde's eyes, Tunde's jaw, her own stubbornness staring back at her from a face that still believed the world made sense. "Yeah, baby, we're still pretty broke. But we're good people, right?" Nadine smiled. It was the first real smile in weeks, the kind that starts somewhere behind the ribs and arrives at the mouth almost as an afterthought. "Yeah, Zara, we're good people, then that's okay." They drove home through streets painted with the last copper light of November, past the bus stop on Keele where it all began, past Hodan's kitchen where the owner still waved at Nadine through the window every time she passed. The city moved around them the way cities always do, indifferent and enormous and full of people carrying weights no one else could see. Somewhere on the other side of town, a man in an expensive house was sitting on the floor making dinosaur sounds for a boy who had finally stopped being afraid of the dark. Somewhere, a 7-year-old girl was growing up believing that her mother was the kind of person who stopped for strangers. And somewhere, in a basement apartment on Trethewey Drive, a ringing phone sat unanswered on the kitchen counter, because the woman who lived there was busy driving her daughter home, and whatever the world wanted from Nadine Achebe, it could wait until she was ready. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. Nadine Achebe had nothing but her word and her courage, and that turned out to be worth more than any check a billionaire could write. If this story reminded you that kindness still matters, that the people with the least sometimes give the most, then carry that with you today. And if you want to hear more stories about ordinary people who choose to be extraordinary, subscribe to this channel and join us for the next one. Until then, remember, the richest thing you can give anyone is a reason to believe that goodness is real.